The crack of a gunshot echoed through the dusty main street of Redemption Creek, Colorado, in the spring of 1876, but it wasn't the sound that changed Lily Morgan's life. It was the gentle hand that pulled her to safety behind a water trough as bullets splintered the boardwalk where she'd stood seconds before. "Stay down, madam," a low voice instructed, the man's breath warm against her ear as another shot rang out. Town's got itself a situation. Lily trembled, her hands clutching her worn carpet bag as she pressed herself against the rough-hewn boards of the trough. The journey from Boston had been long, exhausting, and had cost her nearly everything she owned. Now, not even 5 minutes after stepping off the stagecoach, she found herself caught in what appeared to be a shootout. "I don't understand," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the shouts coming from the saloon across the street. "What's happening?" The man beside her, tall and broad-shouldered with sun-darkened skin and eyes the color of a summer sky, glanced at her briefly before returning his attention to the chaos. "Nothing that concerns you, madam. Just some fellows who've had too much whiskey deciding to settle a dispute the wrong way." Another shot split the air, followed by the sound of breaking glass. The sheriff's voice boomed down the street, demanding order. "Some welcome to Redemption Creek," Lily murmured, trying to keep the fear from her voice. The stranger beside her let out a soft chuckle. Not exactly the town's finest moment. He touched the brim of his worn hat. "Name's Ross Callahan, madam. I'd say it's a pleasure to meet you, but circumstances being what they are." "Lily Morgan," she replied, attempting to adjust her skirts while keeping low. "I've come to take a position as the schoolteacher." Something shifted in Ross's expression: surprise, perhaps even concern. "The schoolteacher? No one mentioned." "Well, no matter now." He glanced over the trough, then ducked back down. "Sheriff's getting things under control." "Where were you heading before all this started?" "The boarding house. Mrs. Whitaker's, I believe." Ross nodded. "I know it. Good place. Clean. When things quiet down, I'll see you there safely." "That's very kind, Mr. Callahan, but I wouldn't want to impose." "No imposition, madam. Town's not always like this, but first impressions matter. Wouldn't want you writing home about how no one in Redemption Creek has any manners." Despite herself, Lily smiled. There was something disarming about the man's straightforward manner, the quiet confidence with which he spoke. His clothes were worn but clean, faded denims, a simple cotton shirt with the sleeves rolled to reveal tanned forearms, scuffed boots, and that hat which had clearly seen better days. Not a wealthy man by any means, but there was an integrity about him that wealth couldn't buy. "The shooting stopped," he observed after a moment. "Still, best wait for the all-clear." He studied her face. "You've come a long way to teach in a town you've never seen before." Lily swallowed, uncomfortable with how perceptive his statement was. "I go where the position is available, Mr. Callahan. Teaching opportunities for women aren't as plentiful as one might hope." "Fair enough." He didn't press further, which she appreciated. "You must be hungry after your journey. Mrs. Whitaker will have food, but her cooking—" He made a face that suggested her culinary skills left much to be desired. Before Lily could respond, the sheriff's voice called out that all was clear. Ross stood first, offering her his hand. His palm was calloused, his grip strong but gentle as he helped her to her feet. "Thank you," she said, brushing dust from her traveling dress, navy blue wool that had once been quite fine but now showed the wear of too many journeys. "Miss Morgan." A portly man in a well-tailored suit hurried toward them, looking flustered. "I'm Thomas Ellsworth, head of the town council. We weren't expecting you until tomorrow. I do apologize for this unfortunate welcome." "The stage made better time than expected," Lily explained, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after 3 days of travel followed by diving behind a water trough. Ellsworth glanced at Ross, his expression cooling slightly. "Callahan, I see you've met our new schoolteacher." "Just happened to be passing by when the trouble started," Ross replied, his tone neutral but something in his eyes suggesting a complicated history between the men. Yes, well, Miss Morgan, I'll escort you to Mrs. Whitaker's myself. The school term doesn't begin for another week, so you'll have time to settle in and prepare. Lily nodded, then turned to Ross. Thank you again for your assistance, Mr. Callahan. My pleasure, Miss Morgan. He touched his hat again. Welcome to Redemption Creek. As Ellsworth led her away, Lily couldn't help glancing back at the tall cowboy who still stood watching them, his expression unreadable beneath the shadow of his hat brim. The boarding house was exactly as Ross had described, clean but sparse, with a narrow bed, a small desk, and a washstand in the room that would be hers for the foreseeable future. Mrs. Whitaker, a thin woman with sharp eyes and a perpetual frown, showed her the facilities and explained the house rules with the precision of a military commander. Breakfast at 6, dinner at noon, supper at 6 in the evening. No gentlemen callers in your room. Laundry day is Monday. Church on Sundays is expected. She paused, eyeing Lily critically. You're younger than I expected. I'm 22, Lily replied, straightening her shoulders. And I've been teaching for 4 years. Mrs. Whitaker seemed unconvinced. Well, I suppose the council knows what they're doing. Rest now. Supper in an hour. Left alone, Lily sank onto the bed, finally allowing herself to feel the magnitude of what she'd done. Boston was thousands of miles away now, along with everything familiar. Here she was, in a town where men shot at each other in the streets, with nothing but her education and determination to sustain her. She hadn't been entirely truthful with Ross Callahan. Teaching positions were indeed scarce, but she hadn't simply gone where the position was available. She'd fled as far west as her meager savings would take her, away from the scandal and shame that had followed her father's financial ruin and subsequent suicide. Away from the whispers and pitying glances, the withdrawn marriage proposal from a man who'd claimed to love her until her family name became synonymous with disgrace. The position in Redemption Creek had been a lifeline, offering not just employment but escape. The town council's letter had promised $30 a month plus room and board, less than she'd earned in Boston, but enough to live on, enough to start anew where no one knew her history. As promised, supper was served precisely at 6. The dining room held 4 other boarders, 2 elderly sisters who whispered constantly to each other, a railway clerk with spectacles so thick they magnified his eyes to twice their natural size, and a young woman who introduced herself as Nancy, the assistant at the general store. The food was indeed as uninspiring as Ross had implied: boiled beef with overcooked vegetables and bread that could have served as a building material, but Lily ate gratefully, knowing hunger from the lean months after her father's death. So you met Ross Callahan today, Nancy said as they were finishing their meal. There was something in her tone that made Lily glance up sharply. Yes, during that unfortunate incident in town. He was kind enough to help me. Nancy smiled, tucking a strand of brown hair behind her ear. He's like that. Always helping folks. Not that everyone appreciates it. Oh. Lily couldn't help her curiosity. Ross keeps to himself mostly. Has a small ranch about 5 miles out of town. Nothing fancy, not like the big spread some have, but it's his. Works hard, pays his debts. Nancy lowered her voice. Some folks in town don't care for him much on account of him speaking up for the Indians when there was trouble a few years back. And because he won't sell his land to the mining company. I see, Lily said, though she didn't, not really. The politics and personalities of Redemption Creek were still a mystery to her. You'll figure it all out soon enough, Nancy said with a knowing look. Small towns have long memories and plenty of opinions. Just thought you should know, seeing as he made an impression. He simply helped me avoid being shot, Lily protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. It was hardly a significant encounter. Nancy just smiled. If you say so. But fair warning, Mrs. Whitaker doesn't approve of him, and she'll have plenty to say if she sees you speaking with him again. After supper, Lily retreated to her room, unpacking her few belongings, 3 dresses besides the one she wore, undergarments, a shawl, a single pair of boots, her teaching materials, and a small photograph of her parents taken before disaster struck. She placed the picture face down in the drawer. No need for questions about her past. Sleep came fitfully that night, her dreams filled with gunshots and her father's voice and oddly, the blue eyes of a cowboy who'd pulled her to safety. The following morning, after a breakfast of watery porridge and weak coffee, Lily set out to see the schoolhouse. Redemption Creek was smaller than she'd imagined, one main street with businesses lining both sides, a few cross streets with residences, the church prominently placed at the north end of town, and the schoolhouse beyond it, set a little apart as if education were an afterthought. The building was simple but sturdy, a single room with rows of benches, a teacher's desk on a raised platform, a pot-bellied stove for winter heating, and a blackboard that had seen better days. The windows were clean, at least, allowing plenty of light, and someone had placed a bunch of wildflowers in a jar on the desk, a welcoming touch that brought a smile to Lily's face. She was examining the small collection of books in the cabinet when the door opened. Turning, she was surprised to see Ross Callahan standing there, hat in hand, looking somewhat uncomfortable. "Mr. Callahan," she greeted him, hoping her voice didn't betray her startled reaction. "Miss Morgan." He nodded, not stepping fully into the room. "Hope I'm not disturbing you." "Not at all. I'm just familiarizing myself with the schoolhouse." He glanced around, a fond expression crossing his face. "Hasn't changed much since I was a boy. Same uncomfortable benches, same smell of chalk and old books." "You were educated here?" she asked, realizing she knew nothing about this man beyond their brief encounter. "For a few years, until my father died, and I had to work full-time." He shifted his weight, then seemed to remember why he'd come. "Actually, I wanted to check if you got settled and all right after yesterday's excitement." His concern touched her. "Yes, thank you. Mrs. Whitaker has been accommodating." Ross's mouth twitched. "That's one way of putting it. The old battle axe hasn't changed either." Lily tried to maintain a proper expression but couldn't help the laugh that escaped. "She is rather formidable. Like facing down a cavalry charge with nothing but a pocket knife," he agreed, his own smile widening to reveal a dimple in his left cheek. An awkward silence fell between them, broken when Ross cleared his throat. "Also wanted to mention my sister Jane has 2 little ones who'll be in your class. 7 and 9. Good kids, though the boy that's Matthew can be a handful." "You have a sister in town?" Lily asked, surprised this hadn't been mentioned. "Just outside it. Her husband works my ranch with me." His expression grew more serious. "Education means a lot to her. To me too. Neither of us got as much as we would have liked." Understanding dawned. This wasn't just a social call, he was evaluating her, making sure his niece and nephew would be well taught. The realization stung a little, but Lily straightened her shoulders. "I take my responsibilities very seriously, Mr. Callahan. Every child deserves the best education possible, regardless of circumstances." He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "I believe you mean that." He turned to leave, then paused. "One more thing. Town council's having a welcome dinner for you Saturday evening at the hotel. Meant to be a surprise, I think, but thought you might appreciate the warning. Ellsworth can be overwhelming when he's playing host." "Thank you for the warning," Lily said, genuinely grateful. "Though I'm not sure I have anything suitable to wear for such an occasion." Ross glanced at her simple blue dress, clean but clearly well worn. "Folks here don't stand on ceremony much, Miss Morgan. You'll be fine as you are." He settled his hat back on his head. "Good day to you, Mr. Callahan," she called as he reached the door. He turned, eyebrows raised questioningly. "I appreciate your concern for your family's education. I hope I can live up to your expectations." Something in his expression softened. "I reckon you'll do just fine, Miss Morgan." After he left, Lily found herself distracted, her thoughts returning to their conversation as she continued examining the schoolroom. There was something about Ross Callahan that intrigued her, a quiet dignity, an intelligence behind those blue eyes that suggested he was more than just the rough cowboy he appeared to be. The week passed quickly as Lily prepared for the school term. She met with Ellsworth again to discuss curriculum and expectations, visited the general store to order supplies, and explored the town, gradually putting names to faces and learning the rhythms of life in Redemption Creek. Nancy proved to be a valuable friend, filling Lily in on local gossip and history during their shared meals at the boarding house. Through her, Lily learned more about the town's key figures: Ellsworth, who owned the bank and several businesses; Sheriff Wade, a fair man who'd kept order for 15 years; Dr. Patterson and his wife, who ran the small hospital; and various other characters who made up the tapestry of the community. She also learned more about Ross Callahan. His parents had come west when he was just a boy, settling on land outside town. His father had died in a mining accident when Ross was 16, leaving him to support his mother and younger sister. He'd worked various jobs: ranch hand, freight hauler, even a stint mining, until he saved enough to buy a small parcel of land. Over the years, he'd built it into a modest but respectable ranch, raising cattle and horses. He could have done better for himself if he'd married Ellsworth's daughter, Nancy confided over tea in Lily's room one evening. Ellen was sweet on him for years, but he never showed interest. Then when the railroad was coming through and the mining company wanted his land, he refused to sell even though they offered good money. Ellsworth hasn't forgiven that slight. It sounds like there's quite a history there, Lily observed, trying to keep her tone neutral, though she found herself increasingly curious about the cowboy. Oh, there's more, Nancy continued, clearly enjoying having an audience for the town's tales. 3 years ago, when there was trouble with the Ute Indians raiding farms after the government cut their rations again, Ross spoke up at a town meeting, said we should be sending food instead of forming a militia. Some called him an Indian lover, said he was betraying his own kind. Was he? Lily asked. Nancy shrugged. He just sees things differently than most. His mother was half Cherokee, though most folks don't know or don't mention it. And he spent some time living with the Ute when he was younger, learning their ways. He speaks their language. This new information added layers to Lily's understanding of Ross Callahan. No wonder he seemed somewhat apart from the town, a man who didn't quite fit into the neat categories society preferred. Saturday arrived, bringing with it the council's welcome dinner. Despite Ross's reassurance, Lily fretted over her appearance, finally settling on her best dress, a deep green wool with minimal trim, made over from one of her mother's gowns but still presentable. The hotel dining room had been decorated for the occasion, tables arranged in a U shape with Lily placed at the center of the head table between Ellsworth and the minister. Nearly 30 people attended: council members and their wives, business owners, and other prominent citizens. Ross was noticeably absent, though Lily told herself she had no reason to look for him. The food was surprisingly good: roast beef, potatoes, fresh bread, and even apple pie for dessert. The conversation flowed easily enough, with most people asking polite questions about her background and experience. Lily navigated these carefully, sharing her teaching credentials, but remaining vague about her family circumstances, saying only that her parents had passed away and she had no siblings. After dinner, Ellsworth stood to make a speech welcoming her formally to the community. His words were gracious, emphasizing the town's commitment to education and the bright future they envisioned with her guiding their children's learning. He ended by presenting her with a gift from the council, a handsome leather-bound ledger for keeping school records. "We're a growing community, Miss Morgan," he concluded, "with aspirations beyond what you see today. The railroad's coming, bringing progress and prosperity. We're fortunate to have someone of your caliber to prepare our children for the modern world that awaits them." Lily thanked him sincerely, touched by the community's apparent investment in their school. As the evening wound down, Various people approached to introduce themselves, including a tall woman with kind eyes who took both of Lily's hands in hers. "I'm Jane Callahan Mitchell," she said. "My brother Ross mentioned meeting you. My children Matthew and Sarah are so excited about school starting. They've been asking every day when they can meet their new teacher." "I look forward to meeting them," Lily replied, immediately seeing the family resemblance in the woman's blue eyes. "Your brother spoke very highly of them." Jane smiled. "Did he? He adores those kids, though he'd never admit how soft he is with them." She lowered her voice. "Don't believe everything you hear about Ross in this town, Miss Morgan. Some folks have long memories for perceived slights." "I form my own opinions of people, Mrs. Mitchell," Lily assured her. "Good. We need more independent thinkers here." Jane squeezed Lily's hands once more before releasing them. "You must come for Sunday dinner sometime soon. I insist." Before Lily could respond, Ellsworth appeared at her side. "Ah, Mrs. Mitchell. I see you've met our new teacher." "Yes, and I was just inviting her to dinner," Jane replied, her pleasant expression never wavering though something in her eyes hardened slightly. "How kind," Ellsworth said. "Though Miss Morgan will be quite busy settling in. Perhaps later in the term would be more appropriate." Jane's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Perhaps Miss Morgan can decide for herself when she'd like to visit." Lily cleared her throat, uncomfortable with the obvious tension. "I would be delighted to join your family for dinner, Mrs. Mitchell, though perhaps after the first week of school when I've established a routine." "Wonderful," Jane said, giving Ellsworth a look that clearly communicated victory. "We'll look forward to it. Good evening, Miss Morgan. Mr. Ellsworth." As Jane walked away, Ellsworth sighed. A headstrong woman, like her brother. Well-meaning, I suppose, but... He trailed off, then smiled at Lily. "You'll find your own way here, Miss Morgan. Just remember that appearances matter in a position of your importance." The warning was clear, if politely delivered. Lily nodded noncommittally, but inside, a spark of rebellion flared. She had come west partly to escape the suffocating social judgments of Boston society. She would not allow herself to be caught in the same trap here, no matter how well-intentioned the advice might be. The school term began the following Monday with 23 students ranging from 6 to 16 years of age. As warned, Matthew Mitchell was indeed spirited, but his enthusiasm could be channeled productively with the right guidance. His sister Sarah was quieter but equally bright, with a gift for arithmetic that Lily quickly recognized and encouraged. The days fell into a pattern teaching from 8 until 3, lesson preparation and grading in the evenings, church on Sundays where she was scrutinized as much as the minister's sermon. Mrs. Whitaker's meals remained barely palatable, but Lily managed, supplementing occasionally with fresh bread from the bakery when her finances allowed. She saw Ross Callahan only in passing during those first few weeks, a nod from across the street, a brief exchange when he brought supplies to the general store while she was shopping. Each time, she felt a strange flutter of awareness, an interest she tried to dismiss as merely curiosity about a man who didn't quite fit the town's expectations. Then came the first heavy rainfall of autumn, turning the roads to mud and the creek that gave the town its name into a swollen, rushing torrent. Lily dismissed school early that day, sending the children home before conditions worsened. She was just locking the schoolhouse door when she heard hoofbeats approaching. Ross Callahan rode up on a sturdy bay horse, water streaming from his oilskin coat and hat. "Miss Morgan," he called over the sound of the rain. "Thought you might need a ride back to town." "That's very kind, but I can manage," she replied, though the muddy path between the schoolhouse and town looked increasingly treacherous. Ross gave her a look that suggested he found her response foolish. "Creek's rising fast. That path will be underwater within the hour." He extended his hand. "Please." The urgency in his voice convinced her. "Very well." He swung down from the saddle with easy grace, then helped her mount before climbing up behind her. The intimacy of the position, his chest against her back, his arms around her to hold the reins, brought heat to Lily's cheeks despite the chill of the rain. "Hold tight," he instructed, and then they were moving, the horse picking its way carefully through the mud. They had gone perhaps halfway when Ross suddenly stiffened. "Creek's already over the lower path," he said, voice tight with concern. "We need to take the high road." He turned the horse, heading for higher ground, but the animal slipped in the mud, nearly losing its footing. Ross steadied it expertly, but Lily could feel the tension in his body. "Is it dangerous?" she asked, trying to keep her voice calm. "Not if we're careful," he replied, though something in his tone suggested otherwise. "Just need to get around this bend." They proceeded more slowly, the rain beating down relentlessly. As they rounded the bend, Lily gasped. The creek had indeed overflowed its banks, water rushing across what had been the path, carrying debris with it, branches, a fence post, even what looked like part of a wagon wheel. "We'll have to go back and take the ridge trail," Ross decided. "It's longer but safer." "Whatever you think best," Lily said, trusting his judgment completely in this situation. The ridge trail proved to be little more than a narrow track winding along the hillside, but it kept them above the rising water. By the time they reached town, Lily was soaked to the skin despite sharing the protection of Ross's coat and trembling with cold. Instead of taking her directly to the boarding house, Ross headed for a small building with a sign reading Patterson's Clinic. "You need to get warm and dry," he explained as he helped her down from the horse. "Mrs. Whitaker won't have a fire going in your room, and these wet clothes are dangerous in this weather." Dr. Patterson's wife met them at the door, clucking with concern when she saw Lily's condition. "Bring her right in, Ross. I'll get her something dry to wear." The next hour passed in a blur as Lily was bustled into a small examination room, given dry clothes, a simple dress that was too large but clean and warm, and seated by a roaring fire with a cup of hot tea laced with whiskey. Ross disappeared during this process, returning later with dry clothes of his own, presumably borrowed from the doctor. "Creek's still rising," he reported, accepting a cup of the doctored tea from Mrs. Patterson. "Sheriff's organizing men to watch for flooding in the lower part of town. I'll be heading back out once I'm sure you're settled." "I'm fine now, thanks to you," Lily assured him, though her voice still trembled slightly from the lingering chill. "You've gone well beyond kindness, Mr. Callahan." He shrugged, uncomfortable with her gratitude. "Just did what anyone would do." "But no one else did," she pointed out softly. "You rode out in this weather specifically to help me." Their eyes met over the rims of their cups, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement, perhaps, of the connection that seemed to be forming despite the town's subtle disapproval. The moment was broken when the clinic door burst open, admitting a drenched and frantic-looking young man.
"Doc.
"We need help at the Wilson's place. Roof collapsed on the barn with Jacob inside." Dr. Patterson emerged from the back room, already reaching for his medical bag. "How bad is it?" "Don't know yet. They're still trying to get him out." Ross was on his feet immediately. "I'll come with you." "No need for both of us to drown," the doctor said, pulling on his coat. "You get Miss Morgan safely to her boarding house once this rain lets up a bit." Ross looked torn, clearly wanting to help but unwilling to abandon Lily. "Go," she urged him. "I'm perfectly fine now, and they may need your strength." He hesitated, then nodded. "Mrs. Patterson, will you see Miss Morgan gets home safely when the rain eases?" "Of course," the doctor's wife assured him. "Now go, both of you." After they left, Mrs. Patterson sighed. "That's Ross for you, always the first to help in a crisis. The town may have its opinions about him, but when trouble comes, they're glad enough to have him around." "He seems like a good man," Lily said cautiously. "The best," Mrs. Patterson agreed, refilling Lily's cup. "My husband says there's not a more honest soul in the territory. Ross has pulled this town through more than one hard time, though few give him credit for it." Later, when the rain finally slackened, Mrs. Patterson escorted Lily back to the boarding house, lending her a shawl to protect against the lingering drizzle. Mrs. Whitaker met them at the door with a disapproving frown, her gaze taking in Lily's borrowed dress and damp hair. "I heard you were gallivanting about in the storm with Ross Callahan," she said, her tone making it clear what she thought of such behavior. "Mr. Callahan kindly offered me a ride when the creek began to flood," Lily replied, keeping her voice even. "It was either accept his help or risk being stranded at the schoolhouse overnight." Mrs. Whitaker sniffed. "There are those in town who would say being stranded would have been preferable to compromising your reputation." "Agnes," Mrs. Patterson interjected firmly. "The girl nearly caught her death. Ross did the right thing, as he always does. Now, she needs rest and warmth, not lectures." The boarding house keeper pursed her lips but stepped aside, allowing Lily to pass. As she climbed the stairs to her room, Lily found herself wondering about a town that would prefer her to risk her health rather than accept help from a man they deemed unsuitable, despite his evident good character. That night, lying in her narrow bed listening to the rain drumming on the roof, Lily realized something had shifted within her. The cool, proper schoolteacher who had arrived in Redemption Creek determined to maintain a respectable distance from everyone was giving way to a woman who questioned the judgments she saw around her and who couldn't stop thinking about a pair of steady blue eyes and the security she'd felt in a certain cowboy's arms, however briefly. The storm passed, but its effects lingered. The creek remained high for days, and news came that 2 farms downstream had been badly damaged. The Wilson barn had indeed collapsed, trapping Jacob Wilson underneath. Though they'd gotten him out alive, his leg was broken in 2 places. School resumed, but Lily found her thoughts often straying to Ross Callahan. Had he been injured helping at the Wilson farm? Was his own property damaged by the flooding? She wanted to ask but hesitated, aware of Mrs. Whitaker's watchful eyes and wagging tongue. Her opportunity came the following Sunday when Jane Mitchell approached her after church, 2 children in tow. "Miss Morgan, may I present my children properly? This is Matthew and Sarah." The children greeted her politely, though Matthew fidgeted with his collar, clearly uncomfortable in his Sunday best. "We've been getting acquainted in class," Lily said, smiling at them. "Matthew has quite a talent for history, and Sarah's arithmetic is remarkable." Jane beamed with maternal pride. "I'm so glad to hear it. Now, about that dinner invitation, would today be too soon? We've been looking forward to having you." Lily hesitated, knowing that accepting would fuel gossip, especially given her recent adventure with Ross. But the genuine warmth in Jane's invitation and her own curiosity about the Callahan family won out. "I would be delighted," she replied. "Thank you." "Wonderful. Ross will drive us out in the wagon after the service." And so Lily found herself seated beside Jane in a sturdy farm wagon, the children across from them, as Ross handled the reins. He'd greeted her with quiet courtesy, though something in his eyes suggested he was pleased she had accepted the invitation. The Mitchell farm was about 3 miles from town, a neat property with a small but well-maintained house, a barn, and various outbuildings. Beyond it, Lily could see more open land stretching toward distant hills. "That's Ross's place beyond those trees," Jane explained, following her gaze. "The children and I live here with my husband Daniel. Ross has his own cabin on his property." The afternoon was pleasant, the meal simple but delicious roast chicken, vegetables from Jane's garden, fresh bread, and an apple pie that made Lily nearly forget her manners as she savored each bite. Daniel Mitchell proved to be a friendly, talkative man who clearly adored his wife and children. Ross was quieter, speaking mainly when addressed directly, though he seemed relaxed in a way Lily hadn't seen before. Here, among family, the reserve he showed in town softened, especially when interacting with his niece and nephew. After dinner, while Jane and Daniel cleared the table, the children begged their uncle to show Miss Morgan the new foal. Ross agreed, and soon Lily found herself walking beside him toward a small paddock where a spindly-legged colt wobbled beside its mother. He's beautiful, Lily said, genuinely impressed by the delicate creature with its oversized ears and curious eyes. Born during the storm, Ross explained. Thought we might lose him, but he's a fighter. Like his owner, from what I hear, Lily said, then blushed at her own boldness. Ross glanced at her, surprise evident in his expression. Been hearing stories about me, Miss Morgan? Some, she admitted. Though I prefer to form my own impressions. And what impression have you formed? His tone was light, but she sensed the question mattered to him. Lily considered her words carefully. That you're a man who helps others without expectation of reward or recognition. That you think for yourself rather than following the crowd. That you care deeply about your family and this land. She paused. That perhaps you've been judged unfairly by some in town. Ross was silent for a long moment, his gaze on the horizon. You see a lot for someone who's been here such a short time. Teachers are trained to observe, she replied with a small smile. And what about you, Miss Morgan? He asked, turning to face her fully. What should I observe about the schoolteacher who came west alone, who speaks like an educated Easterner but wears dresses that have been mended multiple times, who never mentions her family but keeps a photograph hidden in her desk drawer? Lily's breath caught. His observations were too accurate, too personal. You've been watching me closely, Mr. Callahan. As you said, some of us form our own impressions. His expression softened. I don't mean to pry. We all have parts of our past we'd rather keep private. The understanding in his voice nearly undid her. For months, she'd carried her secrets alone, maintaining a careful facade. The temptation to confide in this man who seemed to see through her anyway was almost overwhelming. My father was a banker in Boston, she said quietly, looking at the foal rather than at Ross. He made some poor investments. Lost everything. There was a scandal, accusations of impropriety. He couldn't bear the shame. She swallowed hard. I found him in his study with my mother's pistol in his hand. Ross didn't speak, but she felt his hand touch her arm briefly, a gesture of comfort that asked nothing of her. My mother had died 2 years earlier. There was nothing left. The bank took our house, our possessions. The teaching position I had was withdrawn. No one wanted the daughter of a disgraced banker educating their children. She finally looked at him. So I came west, where no one knew my name or my shame. There's no shame in surviving, Ross said, his voice low and intense. In starting over. In building something new from nothing. His words touched something deep within her, a recognition of a shared experience despite their different backgrounds. Is that what you did? Built something new. He nodded, gesturing toward the land around them. When my father died, we had nothing but debts. I worked every job I could find, sent my sister to live with relatives for a while until I could provide for her properly. Saved every penny until I could buy this land. His expression grew distant. It's not much compared to the big ranches, but it's mine. No one can take it from me. It's beautiful, Lily said sincerely. You've created something meaningful here. Their eyes met, and in that moment, Lily felt a connection that transcended their brief acquaintance, a recognition of kindred spirits who understood loss and rebuilding. The moment was broken by Matthew and Sarah racing toward them, eager to show Miss Morgan the kittens in the barn. Ross stepped back, the private intimacy of their conversation giving way to the children's enthusiasm. As they walked back to the house later, Ross said quietly, Your secret's safe with me, Miss Morgan. We all deserve a fresh start. Thank you, she replied, equally soft. And please, when we're not in town, call me Lily. Something in his eyes warmed. Lily, he repeated, as if testing how the name felt on his tongue. Then you must call me Ross. It was a small thing, this exchange of first names, but it felt significant, a deliberate step across the formal boundaries that separated them. The remainder of the afternoon passed pleasantly, with music around Jane's small piano, stories from Daniel about his days as a freight driver before settling down, and more of Jane's excellent cooking. When it was time to return to town, Lily found herself reluctant to leave the warmth and genuine affection of the Mitchell household. Ross drove her back in the wagon, the children having begged to stay the night with their parents rather than return to town for school the next day. The October evening was crisp, stars appearing in the darkening sky as they traveled in comfortable silence. "Thank you for today," Lily said as the lights of Redemption Creek came into view. "It was the most pleasant Sunday I've had in a very long time." "Jane was glad to have you," Ross replied. "The children too." "And you?" she asked, surprising herself with her boldness. He glanced at her, his expression hidden in the gathering darkness. "I'm always glad of your company, Lily." The simple sincerity in his voice warmed her more than any elaborate compliment could have. They rode the rest of the way in silence, but it was a companionable quiet, filled with unspoken understanding. At the boarding house, Ross helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Good night, Lily," he said, his voice low. "Good night, Ross," she replied, reluctant to end their time together but aware of the curtains twitching in Mrs. Whitaker's front window. As she prepared for bed that night, Lily found herself thinking of the day, not just of Ross, though he featured prominently in her thoughts, but of the sense of belonging she'd felt with his family. For the first time since leaving Boston, she'd experienced something that felt like home. The weeks that followed brought changes to Lily's life in Redemption Creek. Her Sunday dinners with the Mitchells became a regular occurrence, much to Mrs. Whitaker's disapproval. Ross often drove her to and from these gatherings, their conversations growing deeper and more personal with each journey. She learned about his years working the cattle drives, about his time living with the Ute, about his dreams for his ranch. In turn, she shared stories of her childhood in Boston, her love of teaching, her hopes for the future. Each exchange built a foundation of trust and understanding between them. In town, people noticed their growing friendship. Some, like the Pattisons and Nancy, seemed pleased. Others, particularly Ellsworth and his circle, made their disapproval evident in subtle ways: cooler greetings, whispered conversations that stopped when Lily approached, pointed remarks about the importance of a teacher maintaining proper associations. Lily found herself caring less about these opinions with each passing day. The woman who had arrived in Redemption Creek desperate to maintain a spotless reputation was gradually giving way to someone more confident in her own judgments, more willing to follow her heart rather than society's expectations. November brought the first snow, turning the landscape into a glittering wonderland but making travel between town and the outlying farms difficult. School attendance dropped as children from more distant homesteads remained home. Lily worried especially about Matthew and Sarah, missing nearly a week of lessons. On Friday afternoon, as she was dismissing the remaining students, Ross appeared at the schoolhouse door, his coat dusted with snow, his breath visible in the cold air. "Ross," she exclaimed, then quickly composed herself, aware of the curious glances from her students. "Mr. Callahan, what brings you to town in this weather?" He waited until the children had left before answering. "Came to check on things in town, bring some supplies." He stamped snow from his boots. "And to bring you these." From his coat, he produced a stack of papers, completed assignments from Matthew and Sarah. "Jane's been working with them at home. Didn't want them falling behind." Lily took the papers, touched by the family's commitment to education. "Thank you. Please tell them I'm impressed with their diligence." Ross nodded, then hesitated. "There's something else." From his pocket, he drew a small package wrapped in brown paper. "It's not much, but when I saw it at the trading post near the reservation, I thought of you." Surprised, Lily carefully unwrapped the package to reveal a small carved wooden box, its lid inlaid with turquoise stones in a delicate pattern. "It's beautiful," she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth surface. "You craftsmen made it," Ross explained, seeming almost embarrassed. Thought you might use it for keeping special things. The thoughtfulness of the gift moved her deeply. Thank you. I'll treasure it. Their eyes met, and Lily felt the now familiar warmth that Ross's presence always brought her. Something had been growing between them over these past weeks, something neither had put into words but both recognized. The moment was interrupted by the schoolhouse door opening, admitting a blast of cold air and Thomas Ellsworth. Miss Morgan. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Ross. Callahan. Didn't expect to find you here. Just delivering some schoolwork for my niece and nephew, Ross replied, his expression closing off in a way that Lily had come to recognize happened whenever he dealt with certain townspeople. Ellsworth's gaze moved to the carved box in Lily's hands, his eyebrows rising slightly. I see. Well, Miss Morgan, I came to inform you that the school board has scheduled a meeting next Tuesday evening to discuss the winter curriculum. We would appreciate your attendance. Of course, Mr. Ellsworth, Lily replied, carefully rewrapping the box and placing it in her desk drawer. I'll be there. Excellent. He glanced at Ross again. Good day to you both. After he left, Ross sighed. That man has a talent for turning up at inconvenient moments. He means well, Lily said, though without much conviction. He's invested in the school. He's invested in controlling the school and the town, Ross corrected. And he doesn't approve of me darkening your doorstep. Lily began gathering her things, a hint of defiance in her movements. Mr. Ellsworth doesn't decide who may or may not visit the schoolhouse, nor who I'd choose to call friend. Ross's expression softened. Is that what we are, Lily? Friends. The question hung in the air between them, laden with unspoken meaning. Lily met his gaze steadily. At the very least, she replied quietly. Something flared in his eyes, hope, perhaps, or determination. I should get back before the weather worsens. He moved toward the door, then turned back. Sunday dinner as usual? I wouldn't miss it, she assured him. That night, alone in her room, Lily placed the wooden box on her small dresser, opening it to reveal the empty space, waiting to be filled with treasures. Her first impulse was to place her parents' photograph inside, but after a moment's hesitation, she decided against it. That belonged to her past. This box represented something new, something still taking shape. Instead, she placed inside it a small wildflower Ross had picked for her during one of their walks, now pressed and dried between the pages of her Bible. A beginning, perhaps, of a collection of new memories. Tuesday's school board meeting proved to be more challenging than Lily had anticipated. What should have been a straightforward discussion of curriculum became an uncomfortable interrogation of her teaching methods and, more pointedly, her personal associations. We've had some concerns expressed, Ellsworth said, his tone carefully measured, about certain aspects of your integration into our community. I'm not sure I understand, Lily replied, though she had a sinking feeling that she understood perfectly well. A teacher must be above reproach, Mrs. Hargrove, the minister's wife, interjected. Young minds are impressionable, and they look to you not just for academic instruction but for moral guidance. I assure you, my conduct has been entirely proper, Lily said, straightening in her chair. If there are specific concerns about my teaching methods, it's not your teaching that concerns us, Ellsworth interrupted. It's your association with certain elements in the community that some parents find questionable. The implication was unmistakable. Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, but whether from embarrassment or anger, she wasn't certain. If you're referring to my friendship with the Mitchell family, I fail to see how spending Sunday afternoons with a respectable farming family could possibly be objectionable. It's not the Mitchells specifically, Ellsworth clarified, though his expression suggested otherwise. It's the appearance created by your frequent travels alone with Ross Callahan, a man who, while perhaps well-meaning, has a reputation for unorthodox views. Lily looked around the table at the 5 board members, seeing varying degrees of discomfort and judgment in their expressions. Only Dr. Patterson, who had been added to the board the previous year, seemed sympathetic. "Mr. Callahan has been nothing but respectful and helpful to me since my arrival," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "He has shown concern for his niece and nephew's education and has assisted me when I needed help, as any good neighbor would do. No one is questioning Mr. Callahan's helpfulness," Mrs. Hargrove said, her emphasis making the words sound somehow improper. "It's the propriety of a young, unmarried woman spending so much time alone with a bachelor that concerns us."
Dr.
Patterson cleared his throat. "I think we're overstepping our bounds here. Miss Morgan's private associations, provided they don't interfere with her teaching duties, are her own affair. Not when they affect the reputation of our school," Ellsworth countered. "We've worked hard to build a respectable institution here. The railroad is coming, bringing new families, potential investors. Appearances matter." The discussion continued in this vein for nearly an hour, with Lily alternately defending herself and biting back more forceful responses that threatened to escape. In the end, no formal action was taken, but the message was clear. Her friendship with Ross Callahan was not approved by the town's leadership, and continued association with him could jeopardize her position. As she walked back to the boarding house through the cold night, Lily's thoughts were in turmoil. She had come to Redemption Creek seeking a fresh start, security, respectability. The teaching position represented not just employment, but a chance to rebuild her life. Could she risk losing it all because of her growing feelings for a man the town elite had decided was unsuitable? But the alternative, distancing herself from Ross, from the Mitchell family that had welcomed her so warmly, from the first real connection she'd felt since her world collapsed in Boston, seemed equally impossible to contemplate. That night, sleep eluded her. By morning, she had reached no clear decision, but one thing was certain: she would not be dictated to by Thomas Ellsworth or anyone else regarding who she could call friend. The next few weeks brought new tensions. Lily continued her Sunday visits to the Mitchells, though she became more circumspect about her interactions with Ross in town. He seemed to sense the change, his own manner becoming more formal when they encountered each other publicly, though his eyes still conveyed a warmth meant only for her. December arrived with bitter cold and heavy snow that isolated the town for days at a time. Christmas preparations provided a welcome distraction, with the school children practicing for their holiday program and the community organizing various festivities. A week before Christmas, as Lily was decorating the schoolhouse with paper chains and evergreen boughs, Ross arrived with a small pine tree strapped to his saddle. "Thought the children might enjoy a proper Christmas tree," he explained as he set it up in the corner of the room. "It's perfect," Lily said, genuinely delighted. "They'll be so excited." They worked together to secure the tree in a bucket of sand, their hands occasionally brushing as they adjusted branches, each contact sending a flutter through Lily's chest. When the task was complete, they stood back to admire their work. "It needs decorations," Ross observed. "The children will make some tomorrow," Lily assured him. "Paper stars, painted pine cones, popcorn strings." Ross nodded, then reached into his pocket. "Almost forgot. Jane sent these for you." He handed her a small package containing gingerbread cookies. "Said she knows how awful Mrs. Whitaker's cooking is and thought you might need something sweet." Lily laughed, accepting the package gratefully. "Your sister is a treasure. Please thank her for me." "You can thank her yourself on Sunday," Ross said, then hesitated. "That is, if you're still coming." The uncertainty in his voice pained her. "Of course I am. Why wouldn't I be?" He shrugged, his expression guarded. "Noticed you've been careful lately. In town. Thought perhaps someone had said something." Lily sighed, setting the cookies aside. "The school board expressed some concerns about my associations." "Meaning me," Ross said flatly. "Apparently you're a corrupting influence," she replied, attempting to make light of it though the memory of the meeting still stung. Ross's expression darkened. Ellsworth never could mind his own business. It wasn't just him, Lily admitted. Several board members seemed concerned about appearances. And what about you? Ross asked, his voice low. Are you concerned about appearances? The question hung between them, weighted with all they'd shared and all they hadn't yet said. Lily took a deep breath. I came here seeking respectability because I thought that was what I needed to feel secure again. But I'm realizing that respect based on others' narrow judgments isn't worth much. She met his gaze directly. Your friendship, your family's kindness has meant more to me than any approval from Thomas Ellsworth ever could. Something in Ross's expression shifted, a tension releasing. He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the varying shades of blue in his eyes, could feel the warmth radiating from him despite the chill in the schoolroom. Is it just friendship, Lily? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Her heart hammered in her chest. This was the moment, the precipice they'd been approaching for weeks. To step back would be safe. To step forward meant risking everything, her job, her reputation, perhaps even her heart. No, she answered truthfully. It hasn't been just friendship for some time now. Ross's hand came up to cup her cheek, his touch gentle, as if she were something precious. I've wanted to tell you how I feel since that day by the creek.
But I know what people say about me.
Know what associating with me might cost you. Some things are worth the cost, Lily whispered, leaning almost imperceptibly into his touch. The kiss, when it came, was tender, a question more than a demand, an offering rather than a taking. Lily's hands found their way to his shoulders, steadying herself as the schoolroom seemed to tilt around her. Ross's arms encircled her waist, drawing her closer, deepening the kiss with a reverence that brought tears to her eyes. When they finally parted, both breathless, Ross rested his forehead against hers. I've been half in love with you since I pulled you behind that water trough, he confessed, a smile in his voice. Fully in love since you told me your story and didn't break under the weight of it. Ross, she breathed, overwhelmed by his words, by the intensity of her own feelings. The sound of voices outside the schoolhouse brought them back to reality. They stepped apart just as the door opened, admitting two of Lily's older students who had volunteered to help with decorations. Mr. Callahan brought us a Christmas tree, Lily explained, hoping her flushed cheeks would be attributed to the cold. The boys greeted Ross with obvious admiration. His skill with horses and reputation as an excellent shot made him something of a hero to the town's youngsters, regardless of their parents' opinions. I should be going, Ross said, touching the brim of his hat. Miss Morgan.
Boys.
As he turned to leave, his eyes met Lily's once more, conveying a silent promise that their conversation wasn't over, that what had begun between them wouldn't end with this interrupted moment. That night, alone in her room, Lily touched her lips, still feeling the imprint of Ross's kiss. A part of her was terrified by what had happened, by the emotions she'd acknowledged. The sensible schoolteacher who had planned her new life so carefully warned that this path led to uncertainty, perhaps heartbreak. But another part, the part that had survived loss and humiliation, that had traveled alone across a continent to build something new, recognized in Ross a kindred spirit. Someone who understood what it meant to create meaning from nothing, to stand firm in one's convictions despite others' disapproval. The wooden box he'd given her sat on her dresser, and Lily opened it, touching the dried wildflower inside. Tonight, she added another treasure, a small pine cone from the Christmas tree they'd decorated together. Evidence of something growing, something worth fighting for. The Christmas program was a success, with every child performing their part admirably and the schoolhouse filled to capacity with proud parents and community members. Ross attended with Jane and Daniel, standing at the back of the room, his eyes finding Lily's whenever she glanced his way. Afterward, amid the chaos of children reuniting with parents and everyone enjoying the refreshments provided by the Ladies' Aid Society, Ellsworth approached Lily, his expression a mix of approval and caution. "Excellent program, Miss Morgan. You've done well with the children." "Thank you, Mr. Ellsworth." They worked very hard. His gaze drifted to where Ross stood talking with Dr. Patterson. "I hope you've given some thought to our conversation at the board meeting." Lily straightened her shoulders. "I have indeed given it a great deal of thought, Mr. Ellsworth." "And," he prompted when she didn't elaborate, "and I believe that in a community that values education, the content of one's character should matter more than perceptions based on old grievances." She met his gaze steadily. "Ross Callahan is a good man who has shown nothing but respect for me and dedication to his family's well-being. I'm proud to call him friend." Ellsworth's expression hardened. "This isn't Boston, Miss Morgan. In small communities like ours, reputation matters. Your position here depends on maintaining the town's confidence." "Are you threatening my employment, Mr. Ellsworth?" Lily asked, keeping her voice level despite the anger rising within her. "Not at all," he replied smoothly. "Merely reminding you of the realities of your situation." He smiled, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Enjoy the rest of the evening." As he walked away, Lily felt a familiar fear clench her stomach, the same insecurity that had followed her from Boston, the dread of losing everything once again. But it was quickly replaced by something stronger: indignation that this man would presume to dictate her personal life, determination not to be cowed by threats, however veiled. She was still composing herself when Ross appeared at her side, concern evident in his expression. "Everything all right? Saw Ellsworth talking to you." "Just offering his congratulations on the program," Lily replied, not wanting to burden the festive occasion with Ellsworth's implied threats. Ross didn't look convinced, but didn't press the matter. "The children did wonderfully. You should be proud." "I am," she said, smiling genuinely now. "Will you be in town for Christmas, or at the ranch?" "At Jane's," he replied. "Family tradition."
He hesitated.
"We'd like you to join us if you're willing. For Christmas dinner." The invitation touched her deeply. "I'd love to, but how would I get there? The roads might be impassable." "I'll come for you," Ross said simply, as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Weather permitting. Their eyes met, and in that moment, surrounded by the noise and chaos of the celebration, Lily made her decision. Whatever consequences might come from her association with Ross Callahan, they were worth facing for the chance at the happiness she saw reflected in his eyes. "I'll be ready," she promised. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold, the sun glinting off snow-covered landscapes with blinding brilliance. Lily attended the early church service, exchanged small gifts with Nancy and a few other friends in town, then returned to the boarding house to prepare for Ross's arrival. She had spent her meager savings on gifts for the Mitchells: a book of poetry for Jane, a carved wooden whistle for Matthew, a hair ribbon and small doll for Sarah, a fine pocket knife for Daniel. For Ross, she had embroidered a handkerchief with his initials, a simple gift but one made with care and affection. As she was wrapping the presents in brown paper tied with twine, a knock at her door announced, "Mrs. Whitaker." "Mr. Callahan is downstairs," the older woman said, disapproval evident in her pinched expression. "I've told him it's not appropriate for him to call upon you in your room, and that you should receive him in the parlor like a proper lady." "Thank you, Mrs. Whitaker," Lily replied, gathering her packages and the small carpet bag she'd packed with overnight necessities. "I'll be right down." The boarding house keeper's eyes widened at the sight of the bag. "Miss Morgan, surely you're not planning to—" "I've been invited to spend Christmas with the Mitchell family," Lily interrupted, keeping her tone pleasant but firm. "Given the likelihood of weather turning, I may need to stay overnight. I've left a note for Mr. Ellsworth explaining my absence from the Christmas Eve service tonight." Mrs. Whitaker's mouth opened and closed several times before she found words. "I cannot condone this, Miss Morgan. As your landlady and a respectable member of this community, I appreciate your concern," Lily said, moving past her toward the stairs. but I am a grown woman capable of making my own decisions. Merry Christmas, Mrs. Whitaker. Ross was waiting in the small parlor, hat in hand, looking uncomfortable under Mrs. Whitaker's earlier scrutiny, but breaking into a smile when he saw Lily. "Merry Christmas," he greeted her, his eyes warming as they took in her appearance. She had worn her best dress, the deep green one, and arranged her hair with special care. "Merry Christmas, Ross," she replied, ignoring Mrs. Whitaker's audible intake of breath at her use of his first name. He took her packages and bag, nodding politely to the boarding house keeper before escorting Lily outside where a sleigh waited, hitched to two sturdy horses. "A sleigh?" Lily exclaimed, delighted by the surprise. "Borrowed from the Pattisons," Ross explained, helping her into the seat and tucking warm buffalo robes around her. "Thought it would be more comfortable than the wagon, given the snow." As they glided away from town, the sleigh runners hissing over packed snow, Lily felt a sense of freedom she hadn't experienced since arriving in Redemption Creek. Here, away from watchful eyes and wagging tongues, she could simply be herself, not the proper schoolteacher maintaining appearances, but a woman enjoying Christmas with the man who had come to mean so much to her. "You look beautiful," Ross said after they'd traveled some distance, his eyes briefly leaving the road to take in her profile. "That color suits you." Lily felt herself blush, and used to such direct compliments. "Thank you. It's not very practical for every day, but for Christmas. Jane will be pleased you've dressed up. She loves any excuse for celebration." He guided the horses around a bend in the road. "She's been cooking for days. Hope you're hungry." "Starving," Lily admitted. Mrs. Whitaker's idea of Christmas breakfast was the same porridge as every other day, just with a bit of dried apple added. Ross chuckled, the sound warm in the crisp air. "Well, you won't go hungry at Jane's table. And you definitely won't at mine when—" He stopped abruptly, as if realizing he'd said too much. "When?" Lily prompted, curious about what he'd been about to say. Ross cleared his throat. "Nothing. Just thinking ahead is all." They rode in companionable silence for a while, the only sounds the jingling of the harness bells and the sleigh runners on snow. The landscape was transformed by winter, familiar landmarks made new under their blanket of white. "It's so beautiful," Lily murmured, taking in the vista of snow-covered hills and frost-laden trees. "This is my favorite time of year," Ross admitted. "Everything clean and quiet. Feels like a fresh start." "Is that what you needed? A fresh start?" Lily asked, sensing there were parts of his story he hadn't yet shared. He was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "After my father died, yes. Had to figure out who I was going to be without him. What kind of man I wanted to become." He glanced at her. "Then again, after I came back from living with the Ute. That changed me in ways that made fitting back into white society complicated." "How so?" Lily asked, genuinely interested in this part of his past he rarely mentioned. "Saw things differently. Understood that the way we live isn't the only way, or always the best way." He adjusted the reins in his gloved hands. "The Ute, they measure wealth differently, not by what you own, but by what you can give away, by how you care for those who depend on you. A man who feeds his family, protects them, teaches them while he's rich, even if he doesn't have much in material terms." "That sounds like wisdom to me," Lily observed. "Try explaining that to Thomas Ellsworth," Ross said with a wry smile. "To him, progress means more buildings, more businesses, more money changing hands. The Ute and their way of life are just obstacles to be moved aside." The passion in his voice revealed how deeply he felt about these matters, how his time with the native people had shaped his worldview. Lily found herself admiring him even more for his willingness to see beyond the narrow perspectives of his own culture. "Is that why you won't sell your land? Because you see its value differently?" Ross nodded. "That land's not just property to me.
It's possibility.
A future. Something I can build on, something I can pass down someday." He looked at her then, something significant in his gaze. Something worth protecting. The Mitchell farm came into view, smoke curling from the chimney, evergreen boughs decorating the porch. Before they reached the house, Ross slowed the horses, bringing the sleigh to a stop in a sheltered copse of trees. "Before we join the others," he said, turning to face her fully, "there's something I want to say. Something I've been thinking about since that day in the schoolhouse." Lily's heart quickened. "Yes, I meant what I said then about being in love with you." His voice was steady, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it hasn't been long, and I know there are complications with the town and your position, but—" He took her gloved hand in his. "I've never felt for anyone what I feel for you, Lily. Never met someone who understood me the way you do." Tears pricked at Lily's eyes, not from sadness, but from the overwhelming emotion his words evoked. "I feel the same way," she whispered. "It frightens me sometimes, how quickly and completely you've become important to me." "Does it frighten you enough to make you want to step back?" he asked, a vulnerability in his question that touched her deeply. Lily shook her head.
No.
"It frightens me because it's showing me how much I want things I didn't think I could have again: connection, trust, a future with someone who sees me for who I really am." Relief and joy transformed Ross's expression. He leaned forward, cupping her face with one hand as he had in the schoolhouse, and kissed her a kiss deeper and more certain than their first, a kiss that promised rather than questioned. When they parted, both breathless in the cold air, Ross rested his forehead against hers. "I don't have much to offer in material terms, Lily. My ranch is small, the house plain. Life out here is hard sometimes. But I swear to you, whatever I have is yours. I'll work every day to make a good life for us, if you'll have me." It wasn't a formal proposal, not yet, but the intent was clear. Lily's heart soared with the possibility of what he was offering: not wealth or status, but something far more valuable. Partnership, respect, love that saw her worth beyond her circumstances. "Ross Callahan," she said, her voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm her, "I've learned that the richest life isn't measured in dollars or fine things, but in how we care for each other. And by that measure, you are the wealthiest man I've ever known." His smile then was like sunrise breaking over the mountains, radiant, transformative, full of promise. He kissed her once more, quickly but fervently, before taking up the reins again. "We'd better get to the house before Jane sends out a search party," he said, though his eyes lingered on Lily's face, as if memorizing every detail. The Mitchell home was warm and fragrant with the smell of roasting turkey, pine boughs, and Jane's baking. The children greeted Lily with enthusiastic hugs, eager to show her the gifts they'd received that morning and to introduce her to the new puppy Daniel had surprised them with. Jane embraced Lily warmly, whispering, "I'm so glad you've come. It means the world to Ross and to us." The day passed in a blur of wonderful moments: the sumptuous dinner, the exchange of gifts. Lily was moved to tears by the beautiful wool shawl Jane had knitted for her and the hand-carved wooden box Ross presented her with, larger than the first and designed to hold her teaching materials, games by the fire, carols around Jane's piano, and stories of Christmases past. Throughout it all, Lily was aware of Ross watching her, his eyes following her movements with a tenderness that made her heart flutter each time she caught his gaze. They didn't have many moments alone, but they didn't need them. Something had been settled between them in that sleigh, a promise made that needed no further elaboration for now. As evening fell, the snow that had held off all day began to descend, thick flakes swirling from a darkening sky. "You can't possibly go back to town tonight," Jane declared, looking out the window with concern. "The roads will be treacherous." "I anticipated as much," Lily admitted. "I brought overnight things, if it's not an imposition." "Not at all," Jane assured her. "You'll stay in Sarah's room. She can bunk with Matthew for one night." Ross, standing by the fire, caught Lily's eye and smiled, a private, warm smile that communicated his pleasure at having her stay, at extending their Christmas together. Later, as the household settled for the night, Lily found herself alone in the kitchen with Ross, helping to wash the last of the dinner dishes while Jane put the children to bed. "Happy?" he asked softly, handing her a plate to dry. "Happier than I can remember being in years," she replied honestly. "Your family is wonderful, Ross. They think the same of you." He set down the dishcloth and turned to face her fully. "Jane told me earlier that you fit here, like you were always meant to be part of this family." Lily's breath caught at the implication of his words. "Is that how you feel too?" "I knew it the first time you came for Sunday dinner," he said simply. "Watching you with the children, talking with Jane and Daniel. It just felt right. Like seeing the future I've always wanted but wasn't sure I'd find." Lily set down the towel and stepped closer to him, propriety forgotten in the warmth of the kitchen and the depth of her feelings. "I felt it too. This sense of belonging I haven't had since losing my parents." Ross's hands found her waist, drawing her gently to him. "I know we haven't known each other long, by some standards. And I know there are complications, your job, the town's opinions." "None of that matters," Lily interrupted, surprising herself with her certainty. "What matters is what we feel, what we can build together." "And what do you feel, Lily Morgan?" Ross asked, his voice low and intense. "Love," she answered simply. "I love you, Ross Callahan." The joy that bloomed on his face was like nothing she'd ever seen, as if her words had illuminated him from within. "And I love you, more than I have words to say." Their kiss was deeper than those they'd shared before, filled with the certainty of their declarations, the promise of a future together. Lily melted into his embrace, feeling not just desired but cherished, valued in a way she'd never experienced. A sound from the hallway broke them apart, Jane returning from settling the children. She took in their flushed faces and entwined hands with a knowing smile. "About time," she said, her tone warm with approval. "I was beginning to think you two would dance around each other forever." Ross laughed, keeping Lily's hand in his. "Not forever, just until we were both sure." "And are you?" Jane asked, looking between them. "Sure. More sure than I've ever been of anything," Ross replied, his gaze never leaving Lily's face. "Then I'll say congratulations and about time, and I'm going to bed before I embarrass you both with how happy this makes me." Jane hugged them both, then left them alone once more. Later, lying in Sarah's small bed listening to the wind outside and the occasional creak of the house settling, Lily reflected on how dramatically her life had changed in the few months since arriving in Redemption Creek. She had come seeking safety, security, a respectable position, and had found so much more. Love, certainly, but also a sense of purpose beyond merely surviving, a courage to stand by her own convictions rather than bend to others' expectations. Whatever challenges lay ahead, and there would be challenges, she had no illusions about that. She would face them with Ross beside her, their strength combined, their future shared. A Christmas passed, and January brought bitter cold that kept most people close to home. School resumed with lower attendance as snow made travel difficult for children from outlying farms. Lily found herself missing Sarah and Matthew, though Ross brought their assignments when he came to town for supplies. These visits, brief as they were, sustained her through the dreary winter days. They were careful in public, maintaining a proper distance, aware of watchful eyes. But each time their hands brushed as he passed her a package, each time their eyes met across a crowded store, Lily felt the connection between them growing stronger despite the enforced separation. She had not yet told anyone in town about the understanding between them, though she suspected Nancy had guessed from her friends' knowing smiles whenever Ross's name was mentioned. Mrs. Whitaker remained frosty, clearly disapproving of Lily's Christmas visit to the Mitchells, but had stopped short of any direct confrontation. February brought a brief thaw, enough to make the roads passable again. Lily was in the schoolhouse one afternoon, helping a group of older students with an essay assignment, when she heard horses approaching. Looking up, she was surprised to see Thomas Ellsworth dismounting outside, accompanied by a well-dressed stranger. "Children, continue with your work," she instructed, moving to the door to greet the visitors. "Miss Morgan," Ellsworth said, removing his hat. "May I introduce Mr. Harrison Blake of the Denver and Rio Grande Railroad. Mr. Blake, our schoolteacher, Miss Lillian Morgan." Blake, a tall man with a meticulously trimmed beard and expensive coat, bowed slightly. "A pleasure, Miss Morgan. Mr. Ellsworth has spoken highly of your educational program here." "Thank you, Mr. Blake," Lily replied, somewhat confused by this unexpected visit. "What brings you to our schoolhouse, Mr.?" "Blake is touring the town as part of the railroad's final planning for the spur line," Ellsworth explained, his expression animated in a way Lily had rarely seen. "I wanted to show him all our community has to offer potential settlers and businesses." "The railroad brings progress, Miss Morgan," Blake added. "And progress requires education. Modern companies need educated workers, and families considering relocation want good schools for their children." Understanding dawned. This was a demonstration Ellsworth showing off the school as part of his campaign to attract the railroad and the development it would bring. Lily was merely a prop in this performance. "I see," she said, maintaining her polite smile. "Well, as you can observe, we have a full class today working diligently. Would you care to see some of the students' work?" Blake made a show of interest, examining the children's copybooks and listening to Ellsworth extol the virtues of Redemption Creek's commitment to education. Throughout, Lily noted how the banker spoke of future plans: a larger school building, additional teachers, expanded curriculum, all contingent, apparently, on the railroad's arrival and the growth it would spark. "Of course, certain elements are still resistant to progress," Ellsworth said as they prepared to leave. "But we're confident that reason will prevail." "Resistant elements?" Blake inquired. "A few landholders blocking the most direct route for the spur line," Ellsworth explained with forced patience. "Nothing that can't be overcome with proper incentives." The look he exchanged with Blake suggested these incentives might not be entirely above board. Lily felt a chill that had nothing to do with the February weather. "Miss Morgan," Blake said, turning to her with a practiced smile, "it's been a pleasure. I hope to see more of Redemption Creek's educational facilities when I return with our engineering team next month." After they departed, Lily found it difficult to concentrate on the remaining lessons. Ellsworth's reference to resistant elements almost certainly included Ross, whose land she knew lay along the most likely route for the rail spur. The banker's tone had contained a certainty that troubled her, as if the matter was already settled, regardless of Ross's refusal to sell. That evening, she wrote a note to Ross explaining what she had overheard, asking him to be cautious. She gave it to Nancy to deliver, knowing her friend occasionally visited the general store near the Mitchell farm. 2 days later, Ross appeared at the schoolhouse after classes had ended, his expression grim. "Got your note," he said without preamble once they were alone. "Ellsworth's been busy." "What do you mean?" Lily asked, concerned by his tone. "Railroads offered 3 times what they initially proposed for a right-of-way across my land," Ross explained, pacing the small space between desks. "When I refused again, there were suggestions that the county might exercise eminent domain if necessary." "Can they do that?" Lily asked, alarmed. "Legally? Maybe. Depends on how much influence Ellsworth has with the county commissioners." Ross ran a hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as indicating deep concern. "It's not just about the money, Lily. The route they want would cut right through my best grazing land, separate the creek from the rest of the property. It would essentially ruin the ranch." "There must be alternatives," Lily said, moving to stand beside him. "Other routes they could consider." "There are, but they'd cost more, take longer to build." His expression hardened. "Ellsworth doesn't care about my ranch or my livelihood." He cares about his investments, about being the man who brought the railroad to Redemption Creek. Lily took his hand, squeezing it reassuringly. What will you do? Fight it, as long as I can. His eyes met hers, a question in them. But Lily, this could get ugly. Ellsworth has influence, and he's not above using it. If you're associated with me publicly, it could affect your position here. The implication was clear. He was offering her a way out, a chance to distance herself from the conflict ahead. The gesture touched her deeply, even as she rejected it completely. Ross Callahan, she said firmly, if you think I would abandon you over Thomas Ellsworth's railroad schemes, you don't know me very well. A smile tugged at his lips despite his concern. No, I suppose I should know better by now. You should, she agreed, returning his smile before growing serious again. We'll face this together, whatever comes. He drew her into his arms then, holding her tightly as if anchoring himself in her certainty. I love you, Lily Morgan. More than this land, more than anything. I love you too, she whispered against his chest, wishing she could shield him from the battle ahead, but knowing all she could offer was her unwavering support. That weekend, Lily accompanied Ross to a meeting with several other ranchers and farmers whose land would be affected by the proposed rail spur. The gathering was held at the Mitchell farm, away from town and prying eyes. 8 men and 3 women besides Ross, Jane, Daniel, and Lily crowded into the Mitchells' main room, their expressions ranging from worried to angry. Ross introduced Lily simply as Miss Morgan, the schoolteacher, though the glances exchanged suggested most had already drawn conclusions about their relationship. Ellsworth's been busy, a weathered man named Harkins began, echoing Ross's earlier assessment. Railroads made offers to all of us, some more generous than others. They offered the Wilkinsons half what they offered me for twice the acreage, another man added, gesturing to an elderly couple seated near the fire. Doesn't take much to figure they're trying to divide us. What about the alternative route? Ross asked, spreading a rough map on the table. Through the Eastern Valley? It avoids most of our properties. Longer by about 3 miles, Harkins replied, and would require a bridge over the wider part of the creek. More expensive, more time-consuming, but less destructive to established ranches and farms, Jane pointed out. The discussion continued, with various options considered and rejected. The consensus gradually formed. They would present a united front, refusing individual sales but collectively proposing the Eastern Valley route as an alternative that would still bring the railroad to Redemption Creek while preserving their livelihoods. We'll need someone to draft the proposal, Daniel suggested. Someone who can write persuasively. All eyes turned to Lily. I'd be happy to help, she said, though anxiety fluttered in her stomach at the thought of taking such a public stance against Ellsworth's plans. You understand this could be risky for you, Ross said quietly, clearly sharing her concern. Ellsworth has considerable influence over the school board. Lily straightened her shoulders. Some things are worth the risk. Besides, I'm not opposing the railroad, just advocating for a route that doesn't destroy people's homes and livelihoods. The gratitude in the faces around her confirmed she'd made the right decision, regardless of potential consequences. These were good people trying to protect what they'd built, not resistant elements standing in the way of progress as Ellsworth had characterized them. Over the next week, Lily worked on the proposal, carefully crafting arguments that emphasized the community benefits of the alternative route while acknowledging the importance of the railroad to the region's development. Ross visited the schoolhouse after hours to review the document, offering insights about the land and the practical considerations of various routes. These evening meetings, ostensibly for work on the proposal, became precious moments for them to be together away from public scrutiny. Sometimes they would talk for hours, sharing stories from their pasts, dreams for their future, building the foundation for the life they hoped to create together. When this is settled, Ross said one evening as they sat side by side at one of the student desks, the proposal finally complete between them, I want to show you something at the ranch." "What is it?" Lily asked, curious about his mysterious tone. "A place I think you'll like. Been working on it in my spare time." His eyes held hers, something significant in his gaze. "Something for our future if you still want that." "I want it more than ever," she assured him, leaning into his side as his arm encircled her shoulders. "Good," he murmured, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Because I can't imagine my life without you in it now." The following Saturday, a delegation including Ross, Harkins, and 2 other ranchers traveled to Denver to present their proposal to the railroad's regional director. Lily spent the day in nervous anticipation, alternating between hope that their reasonable alternative would be accepted and fear that Ellsworth's influence would prevail. Her anxiety was compounded by an unexpected summons to meet with the school board that evening. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. Ellsworth must have learned of her involvement with the landowner's counter-proposal. The meeting confirmed her worst fears. Ellsworth, presiding over the hastily assembled board, cut directly to the point. "It has come to our attention, Miss Morgan, that you have involved yourself in matters well outside your professional responsibilities, specifically opposing progress that would benefit this entire community." "I've done no such thing, Mr. Ellsworth," Lily replied, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I merely assisted some community members in articulating an alternative that would allow progress while preserving their homes and livelihoods." "You've aligned yourself publicly with individuals opposing the railroad's plans," Mrs. Hargrove interjected. "Plans that would bring tremendous growth and opportunity to Redemption Creek." "I've aligned myself with truth and fairness," Lily countered, her initial nervousness giving way to indignation. "The alternative route still brings the railroad here. It simply does so without destroying ranches that have been built through years of hard work. This is precisely the sort of involvement in controversial matters that we cautioned you against," Ellsworth said, his tone hardening. "Your position as teacher requires neutrality on divisive community issues." "With respect, Mr. Ellsworth, there is nothing neutral about watching families lose their land and livelihoods when a reasonable alternative exists." Lily looked around the table, meeting each board member's eyes in turn. "Is that really the lesson you want taught in this community? That profit matters more than people?" Dr. Patterson cleared his throat. "Miss Morgan makes a valid point. The purpose of education isn't just to teach facts, but to instill values including fairness and consideration for all community members." "This isn't about values, Doctor. It's about appropriate professional conduct," Ellsworth insisted. "Miss Morgan was hired to teach our children, not to insert herself into business matters she doesn't fully understand." "I understand enough," Lily said, her voice quiet but firm. "I understand that Ross Callahan and others like him have built something valuable through their own hard work. I understand that the route you prefer, Mr. Ellsworth, would destroy that work when an alternative exists that would preserve it while still bringing your railroad." "Ross Callahan," Ellsworth repeated, a cold smile forming. "So, we come to the heart of the matter. Your association with Callahan has clouded your judgment, Miss Morgan. Your duty is to this school, to these children, not to a man whose stubborn refusal to embrace progress threatens this town's future." Lily felt heat rise to her cheeks, but whether from embarrassment or anger, she couldn't tell. "My judgment is perfectly clear, Mr. Ellsworth. And yes, I care deeply for Ross Callahan, a man who exemplifies the values of hard work, integrity, and community that I would hope to instill in my students." A stunned silence followed her declaration. She had not intended to be so forthright about her feelings for Ross, but Ellsworth's dismissive tone had provoked a response she couldn't contain. "I see," Ellsworth said finally. "Then I believe the board must consider whether your continued employment is in the school's best interest." "Thomas, Dr. Patterson objected. "You can't dismiss a teacher midterm without cause, and supporting landowners' rights is hardly cause for termination." "We're not dismissing her tonight," Ellsworth clarified, his gaze never leaving Lily's face, merely putting her on notice that her conduct is under review. The board will reconvene after the railroad matter is settled to make a final determination. The implied threat was clear. If Ross and the others prevailed with their alternative route, Lily's job would be forfeit. Ellsworth was using her position as leverage against the landowner's opposition. "I understand," Lily said, rising from her chair with as much dignity as she could muster. "If that's all, I'll take my leave." "One more thing, Miss Morgan," Ellsworth said as she reached the door. "Until this matter is resolved, I suggest you maintain a proper distance from Mr. Callahan. For appearance's sake." Lily turned, meeting his gaze directly. "Mr. Ellsworth, I have never allowed anyone to dictate my personal associations, and I don't intend to start now. Good evening." She left the schoolhouse with her head high, though once outside, she leaned against the building's wall, suddenly weak with the realization of what she'd done. She had essentially declared her relationship with Ross publicly and defied Ellsworth's authority in the same breath. Her position, which had represented security and a fresh start, now hung by a thread. Yet alongside the fear, she felt something else of fierce pride in standing up for what was right, for the man she loved, for the values she truly believed in. Whatever came next, she would face it without regret. The following day, Sunday, brought Ross back from Denver. He came directly to the boarding house, his expression revealing both weariness and excitement as Mrs. Whitaker reluctantly showed him into the parlor where Lily waited. "How did it go?" she asked as soon as they were alone, moving to his side and taking his hands in hers. "Better than expected," he replied, squeezing her hands gently. "The regional director actually listened. Said our alternative had merit and deserved consideration. They're sending surveyors next week to assess both routes." Relief flooded through her. "That's wonderful news." "It's a start," Ross agreed. "No guarantees yet, but at least they're looking at options." His expression grew concerned as he studied her face. "You look tired. Everything all right here?" Lily hesitated, not wanting to burden him with her troubles when he'd just achieved a tentative victory. But they had promised honesty between them, and she wouldn't begin their life together with secrets. "The school board called a meeting last night," she admitted. "Ellsworth knows about my involvement with your proposal." Ross's expression darkened. "I was afraid of this." "What happened?" Lily related the meeting's events, including her declaration about her feelings for Ross and Ellsworth's implied threat to her position. As she spoke, she watched various emotions cross Ross's face: anger, concern, and finally a deep tenderness that made her heart ache. "I'm sorry," he said when she finished. "This is exactly what I feared that loving me would cost you." "Don't you dare apologize," Lily replied firmly. "I made my choice with open eyes, Ross. And I would make the same choice again." He pulled her into his arms then, holding her tightly as if to protect her from Ellsworth's threats through sheer force of will. "We'll figure this out," he murmured against her hair. "Together." They spent the afternoon walking by the creek, safely away from town and curious eyes, discussing possibilities. If Lily lost her position, she could perhaps find another teaching job in a neighboring town, though it would mean separation. Ross could sell his land after all, though the very suggestion made Lily object vehemently. His ranch represented not just his livelihood but his heritage, his future, everything he'd worked for. "There's another option," Ross said as they sat on a fallen log watching the creek's waters flow past. "One I've been thinking about for some time." Lily looked at him questioningly. "Marry me," he said simply. "Not someday. Not when this is all settled now. This week." The directness of his proposal took her breath away. "Ross, I know it's sudden," he continued, taking her hands in his. "And I know it's not the romantic proposal you deserve. But I love you, Lily. I want to build a life with you, face whatever comes together as husband and wife." "What about my job?" she asked, practical concerns emerging even as her heart soared at his words. They can't dismiss you for being married, Ross pointed out. It might actually strengthen your position. A married woman has more standing in the community than a single one, fair or not. Married to you specifically might not help, given Ellsworth's feelings, Lily observed wryly. Maybe not, Ross acknowledged. But at least then whatever happens, we face it together, under the same roof, building our life despite Ellsworth and his schemes. The image was compelling, waking each day beside Ross, sharing meals and conversation, working together to build something lasting. No more stolen moments, no more careful public distance, no more returning to Mrs. Whitaker's cold boarding house alone. Yes, she said, the certainty in her heart overriding all practical concerns. Yes, I'll marry you, Ross Callahan. The joy that transformed his face was like sunrise breaking over the mountains. He cupped her face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that made tears spring to her eyes. I have something for you, he said when they parted. From his pocket, he drew a small object wrapped in a handkerchief. Been carrying this for weeks, waiting for the right moment. He unwrapped a simple gold band with a small pearl set in its center. It was my mother's, he explained. Not fancy, but it's perfect, Lily breathed, extending her hand so he could slip it onto her finger. Absolutely perfect. The ring fit as if it had been made for her, the pearl gleaming softly in the afternoon light. Lily stared at it, marveling at how a simple band of metal could represent such a profound change in her life's direction. I'll speak to Reverend Hargrove today, Ross said, his voice filled with new purpose. See if he can marry us Wednesday evening. So soon? Lily asked, though not in objection, merely surprise at the rapid pace of events. I've waited long enough to make you my wife, Ross replied, his eyes warm with promise. Don't want to wait a day longer than necessary. As they walked back toward town, plans taking shape between them, Lily felt a lightness she hadn't experienced in years. Whatever challenges lay ahead, Ellsworth's opposition, the railroad's decision, the town's potential disapproval, they would face them together, their strength combined, their future shared. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Redemption Creek. Nancy hugged Lily fiercely when told, declaring she'd known all along they were perfect for each other. Mrs. Whitaker received the news with tight-lipped disapproval, informing Lily she would need to vacate her room immediately following the wedding as the boarding house did not accommodate married couples. Jane was ecstatic, immediately offering to host the ceremony at the Mitchell farm and insisting on making Lily's wedding dress. Nothing elaborate, she promised, but something special for the day. The children's reactions to the news that their teacher would be marrying Matthew and Sarah's uncle ranged from wide-eyed surprise to matter-of-fact acceptance. Little Emma Wilson asked if this meant they would get a holiday from school, while older James Peterson wondered solemnly if they should still call her Miss Morgan or Mrs. Callahan now. You'll have a new name soon enough, Lily told them with a smile. But for now, everything continues as usual. Not everything continued as usual, however. Ellsworth made his disapproval evident by removing his 2 grandchildren from school the day after the engagement became public, sending them to stay with relatives in Denver for superior educational opportunities. Other reactions from the town were mixed. Some, like the Pattisons, offered sincere congratulations. Others maintained a polite but cool distance, clearly uncertain about associating with someone who had aligned herself so definitively with the resistant elements, opposing the railroad's preferred route. Through it all, Lily found herself surprisingly untroubled by the shifting social landscape. The security she had sought in Redemption Creek, she now realized, wasn't found in the approval of people like Ellsworth or Mrs. Whitaker, but in the love of a good man, the warmth of his family, and her own growing confidence in the rightness of her choices. Wednesday arrived clear and cold, a perfect late February day, with brilliant sunshine making the snow-covered landscape glitter like diamond dust. Jane had indeed created a beautiful dress for Lily's simple but elegant, pale blue wool with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, designed to keep her warm while still looking bridal. "Something borrowed," Jane said, fastening a silver pendant around Lily's neck, a family heirloom passed down from Ross and Jane's mother. "Something blue," she added, gesturing to the dress. "The pearl in your ring is old, and Ross himself is definitely something new in your life." Lily laughed, hugging her soon-to-be sister-in-law. "Thank you for everything, Jane. For welcoming me, for this beautiful dress, for—" She hesitated, emotion threatening to overwhelm her. "For loving my stubborn brother?" Jane suggested with a smile. "For showing me what family can be," Lily corrected softly. "After losing my parents, I didn't think I'd ever feel that sense of belonging again." Jane squeezed her hands. "You belong with us, Lily Morgan. Have from the first day you came to dinner. Ross saw it immediately that you fit here, with him, with all of us." The ceremony itself was simple, but deeply meaningful. Reverend Hargrove, despite his wife's reservations about the match, performed the service with genuine warmth. Ross, standing tall and handsome in his best clothes, watched Lily walk toward him with such naked adoration in his eyes that she nearly forgot to breathe. Their vows were traditional, but spoken with profound sincerity. When Ross placed the gold band on her finger beside her mother's ring and declared, "With this ring, I thee wed," Lily felt the last pieces of her old life falling away, replaced by the promise of something new and wonderful. "I now pronounce you man and wife," Reverend Hargrove declared. "You may kiss your bride." Ross's kiss was gentle but filled with promise, a pledge of all they would share in the days and years to come. The celebration afterward was joyous, a feast prepared by Jane, music from a local fiddler, dancing in the Mitchells' cleared main room, children running about with excitement at the unusual weekday festivity. Dr. and Mrs. Patterson attended, as did Nancy and several other friends from town. Notable by their absence were Ellsworth and his circle, but their disapproval seemed distant and unimportant amid the genuine happiness surrounding the newlyweds. As evening fell, Ross led Lily outside to where a sleigh waited, decorated with evergreen boughs and ribbons by the children. "Ready to see your new home, Mrs. Callahan?" he asked, helping her into the seat and tucking buffalo robes around her against the evening chill. "More than ready, Mr. Callahan," she replied, the new name feeling strange but wonderful on her lips. They bid farewell to their guests amid cheers and well wishes, then set off across the snowy landscape toward Ross's ranch. The moon was rising, casting silver light across the pristine white fields as they traveled in companionable silence, both absorbing the magnitude of the step they had taken. "No regrets?" Ross asked after a while, glancing at her profile in the moonlight. "Not a single one," Lily assured him, nestling closer against his side. "Except perhaps that we didn't do this sooner." His laugh warmed the cold air between them. "We got plenty of time to make up for that." The ranch came into view, a modest but well-built cabin with smoke curling from the chimney, a barn and several outbuildings visible in the moonlight, all nestled in a sheltered valley with hills rising protectively around it. "It's not much compared to what you might have had in Boston," Ross said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice for the first time that day. "It's perfect," Lily replied, meaning it completely. "It's home." He helped her from the sleigh, but instead of leading her toward the cabin's door, he surprised her by sweeping her into his arms. "Ross," she exclaimed, laughing as he carried her toward the house. "I can walk." "It's tradition," he explained, managing the steps to the porch without difficulty despite his burden. Carrying the bride across the threshold. "For luck and happiness." At the door, he paused. "Close your eyes," he instructed. "I have a surprise." Intrigued, Lily obeyed, feeling him maneuver through the doorway while still holding her securely. The immediate warmth of a fire welcomed them, along with a scent she hadn't expected: fresh paint. "You can look now," Ross said, setting her gently on her feet. Lily opened her eyes and gasped. The cabin's interior had been transformed since her last visit. Fresh paint brightened the walls, new curtains hung at the windows, and a bookshelf stood in one corner, already filled with volumes she recognized from her own small collection that Jane must have smuggled from the boarding house. But most surprising was the desk positioned near the largest window, a beautiful piece of furniture with a chair upholstered in blue fabric that matched the curtains. "For your lessons," Ross explained, watching her reaction anxiously. "I know you'll need to prepare for school grade papers. Thought you should have a proper place to work." Tears filled Lily's eyes as she took in the thoughtfulness of his preparation. He hadn't just made space for her in his home, he had created a place specifically for her work, acknowledging the importance of her teaching to her identity. "It's wonderful," she whispered, turning to face him. "All of it. Thank you." Ross's expression softened with relief and love. "Wanted everything to be perfect for you. For us." "It is," she assured him, stepping into his embrace. "Absolutely perfect." Later, much later, as they lay together in the darkness of their bedroom, Lily's head resting on Ross's chest, his heartbeat strong and steady beneath her ear, she reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the devastation of her father's suicide and the loss of everything familiar, through the long journey west seeking only security and respectability, to finding instead a love so profound it had given her the courage to risk everything for its sake. "What are you thinking?" Ross murmured, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes losing everything is the only way to find what truly matters," she replied, pressing a kiss to his skin. "That I had to travel thousands of miles to find my way home." His arms tightened around her. "And now you're here. Home. Where you belong." "Where we belong," she corrected softly. "Together." As sleep claimed them, wrapped in each other's warmth against the winter chill beyond our walls, Lily's last conscious thought was of gratitude for the man beside her, for the life they were beginning, for the love that had transformed loss into possibility, exile into homecoming. In the months that followed, life settled into new patterns for the Callahans. Lily continued teaching, facing down Ellsworth's disapproval with quiet dignity. The railroad eventually chose the alternative route, influenced not only by the landowner's proposal, but by growing public support for preserving established ranches and farms. Ellsworth's defeat in this matter was tempered by the fact that the railroad came to Redemption Creek regardless, bringing the growth and development he had championed. Spring arrived, melting snow, and bringing new life to the land. On the ranch, calves were born, crops planted, fences mended. Lily divided her time between teaching and learning the rhythms of ranch life, discovering in herself a resilience and adaptability she hadn't known she possessed. Weekends and evenings were filled with the simple pleasures of building a life together, shared meals, conversation by the fire, planning for the future. Ross taught her to ride properly, to identify the wildflowers that bloomed across the high meadows, to recognize the calls of birds that made their home in the valley. In turn, she read to him in the evenings, expanding his knowledge of literature and history, subjects his limited formal education had only touched upon. By summer's end, Lily had news of her own to share. A child would join their family in the spring, conceived in love and already cherished beyond measure. Ross's reaction to the announcement was everything she could have hoped for: joy, wonder, and a protective tenderness that manifested in 1,000 small ways as her body changed with the growing life within. A son to inherit the ranch, Jane declared confidently when told the news, though Ross insisted he would be equally delighted with a daughter. "A child to inherit your kindness and her intelligence," he told Lily as they lay in bed one night, his hand resting gently on her still, flat stomach. "That's all that matters." As her pregnancy progressed and autumn painted the landscape in fiery hues, Lily sometimes marveled at how completely her life had transformed in just 1 year. The woman who had stepped off the stagecoach in Redemption Creek, alone and uncertain, bore little resemblance to the woman she had become: wife, expectant mother, respected teacher, and integral part of a community that had, for the most part, come to accept her choice of husband. Even Mrs. Whitaker had thawed somewhat, especially after Lily helped her nephew gain admission to a teaching college in Denver through a letter of recommendation. Ellsworth remained cool but correct in his dealings with her. His focus shifted to new ventures now that the railroad had arrived. Winter came again, harsher than the previous year, with storms that isolated the ranch for days at a time. During one such period, with snow piled high around the cabin and the world beyond their windows transformed into a white wilderness, Ross built a cradle from wood he had been seasoning since learning of Lily's pregnancy. "It's beautiful," she said, running her fingers over the smooth curves and intricate carvings that decorated the headboard's stars and moons, plants and animals, symbols of the world their child would grow to explore. "Something to welcome our little one," Ross replied, his expression a mixture of pride in his craftsmanship and anticipation of the child who would soon occupy it. "Something made with love." In late March, as the first signs of spring began to emerge from winter's grip, their daughter was born, a healthy child with her father's blue eyes and a dusting of dark hair that promised to be as rich as her mother's. They named her Hope, for what she represented to them: both the fulfillment of dreams, the promise of future joys, the continuation of what they had built together. "She's perfect," Ross whispered, holding his daughter for the first time, his calloused hands impossibly gentle with her tiny form. "Perfect like her mother." Lily, exhausted but radiant, watched the man she loved cradle their child and felt her heart might burst with happiness. This was what she had found in the West: not just security or respectability, but love in its most complete form. A man who valued her for herself, who had offered not wealth but something far more precious: devotion, partnership, a home built on mutual respect and shared dreams. As the years passed, their family grew. Hope was joined by a brother, then later a sister. The ranch prospered, not in the grand manner of the territory's largest operations, but steadily, providing well for their needs and allowing them to help others when times were hard for neighboring farms. Lily continued teaching until the birth of their third child, then devoted herself to educating their children at home until they were old enough to attend school in town. By then, Redemption Creek had grown considerably, with a larger schoolhouse and several teachers, the railroad having brought the expansion Ellsworth had predicted. Through all the changes in the town, in their family, in themselves, one thing remained constant: the love between Ross and Lily, deepening with each challenge faced together, each joy shared, each year that bound them more completely to each other and to the life they had created. On their 20th anniversary, Ross took Lily back to the spot by the creek where he had proposed, now a favorite family picnic location. Their children were with Jane and Daniel for the day, giving the couple rare time alone together. "Happy?" Ross asked, the question echoing the one he had asked so many times over the years, though he already knew the answer. "Completely," Lily replied, leaning against his shoulder as they watched the creek flow past, its waters catching the spring sunlight. "You've given me more than I ever dreamed possible, Ross Callahan." He smiled, the lines at the corners of his eyes deepening, lines she loved because they had been earned through years of laughter and outdoor work, through watching their children grow, through building a life of meaning together. "I wasn't rich when you met me," he said, taking her hand, still slender, but now marked by years of ranch work alongside her teaching. "Couldn't offer you much beyond my love." "You offered me everything that matters," Lily corrected softly. "You fed me when I was hungry for connection, held me when I needed strength, loved me when I felt unworthy of love." She squeezed his hand. "You made me feel precious, like something of immeasurable value." "Because you are," Ross said simply. "More valuable than gold or silver, more precious than any fortune." The best decision I ever made was pulling you behind that water trough the day you arrived. Lily laughed, the sound as bright and clear as it had been when they were younger. And the best decision I ever made was letting you. As they walked back toward home, toward the ranch that had grown and improved over the years, toward the children who were their greatest treasure, toward the future they continued to build together, Lily reflected on how a journey begun in loss and uncertainty had led to such abundance. Not material wealth, perhaps, but a richness of experience, of love, of purpose that no amount of money could have purchased. The cowboy who had saved her that first day in Redemption Creek hadn't been rich in the world's estimation. But he had offered her his heart, his home, his unwavering support, and in doing so, had made her the wealthiest woman in the territory in all the ways that truly mattered.